Bear with me. Instagram's a little slow.
No worries, no worries.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Mr. Charles Hansen is here to talk to us about running for city council. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep. So let me first kind of just go over why I do this, because not everybody understands why I'm interviewing all these politicians. And the main reason is I'm a real estate agent
Okay.
and I sell a lot of houses. I've been in the business for 20 years. And when I go back to some of my clients, oftentimes I notice they're not really into local politics. And some of them don't even know who are the city council members that are representing them. And, I think that's kind of sad. And I think that in a lot of ways, local government is way more important than what happens on the Fed level. But yet, everyone has an opinion on the Fed level. That's the funny thing.
Right.
So, anyways, the goal here is to kind of introduce some of the candidates or representatives that have been elected to the people that I've sold houses to in the past, in hopes of people getting interested in the local politics and kind of get familiar with the people that represent them. So,
Right.
thank you very much for helping me out. So, I appreciate you coming on.
I know. I appreciate you for having me. Thanks for the invite.
Yep. So let's get started. And why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in San Mateo?
So, a little bit about myself and my journey to San Mateo. I was born in Dallas, Texas. I moved around quite a bit for work. I was kind of in nonprofit before I knew I was in nonprofit. I was coaching little league and running summer camps. And then when I got in college, I was like, oh, I've been doing this longer than I thought I have. So I immediately took a liking to it. I actually changed my major in the middle of freshman year. I graduated, went to work for the YMCA. I've worked for a nonprofit for over 2 decades, and I have been fortunate enough to work for some of the big boys, the YMCA, Salvation Army, Boys and Girls Club, running programs, overseeing the infrastructure of those programs, growing YMCA's. I was very fortunate where I got a job with the YMCA that I wasn't ready for. I think I can look back and know I wasn't ready for it, but there was an opening and someone had left, and it was either kind of one of those, cancel the programs for the summer camp for the kids, or I step up, and I decided to step up, and I knew I would figure it out along the way. And luckily I did for everyone's sake. And I was touted at that point as the person that could go into struggling YMCA's and revitalize membership bases, programs, kind of the tone and the feel of the YMCA in different cities and different states. I worked for a few in the DFW area, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Michigan, and then I landed here in San Mateo a few years ago, kind of towards the tail end of COVID. The journey to San Mateo kind of was shaped, as I've mentioned, by personal and professional dedication. Uh, I've had, like I said, the 2 decades of nonprofit leadership have this has always been my trajectory. Running for city council, they're a lot more similar than I think people realize. You're still, you're serving the community. You're making decisions that affect people's families, people's livelihood, depending on the level of those programs. You can affect the trajectory of generations. So so when I joined Peninsula Family Service, where I currently work at as the chief program officer, where I oversee 45 different program sites and services. Me and my wife, when we found out we were excited that we found out that we were expecting while we were in San Mateo, because we enjoyed everything about San Mateo and everything it had to offer, the city's diversity and community spirit. It kind of resonated with me and my wife, and we were like, okay, this is somewhere we definitely want to kind of plant roots and, for lack of a better term, become real adults and raise our family. And
May I ask a question real quick?
yeah, of course.
So being originally from Dallas, this weather outside right now doesn't faze you, huh?
It phases me a lot more than it should. It phases me a lot more than it should. It's definitely that different heat. But the past 3 days, it's been it's been rough. I think
Okay.
the funny thing is, as I mentioned, uh, my son, 9 month old, well, 10 month old now, he's
Wow.
handling it so much better than the adults. Like
Yeah.
he's still running around, crawling around, playing, and me and my wife are like, "Dude, can you just take a break? It's like 92 degrees." But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah. So I've been working at Peninsula Family Service, and it's not. This is not just a place where I work. I've met some amazing people through some leadership academies, some civil service academies. Um, it's where I've committed to making a difference since the day I got here, and and I and I want this to remain a place that, in 20 years, if my son chooses to like raise his family here, if he has a family or wants to come back and call this home, like he has that opportunity. It's affordable, safe, full of opportunities, and I know the city offers a mix of like green spaces and some infrastructure, and I just want to make sure we're taking all the steps to make sure those things are still in place, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, because as crazy as it seems, like it starts now. If I want to make sure those things, it takes a while for all these changes and to make sure things are in place for him. They start now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of other people on city council, and a lot of them are saying some of these policies that they've been able to pass aren't even going to take effect until, say, 4, 5, 6
Yeah,
years
yeah,
after their term. So
right,
I certainly understand why now is the best time.
right,
Now,
absolutely.
yeah. So the one thing I heard from you was that, you kind of dedicated your life on the nonprofit side. And I'm willing to bet you've done a lot of great things from a micro level. Now, running for city council, was it because that you wanted to make a difference on a macro level? Would that be fair to say?
That would be a fair assessment, and also because it feels like at the local level, city council feels macro, but it's not really macro because in the grand scheme of things, it's also still
Sure.
micro on your lens. But a couple of I mean, I mentioned one, obviously, like family and wanting to see all the families in San Mateo have opportunities to thrive and grow and establish roots and call this place home. But more so at the local level, it's more tangible. Like
Hmm.
you can see it, you can feel it. You're like, oh, I helped build this park. I helped make sure that this crosswalk that was once the most dangerous in the city, now it's one of the best, and things like that. And it's tangible, as opposed to like once you start getting board of supervisors, state and state, like the more you ascend, it becomes like you're doing the work and you're doing the good, but it kind of feels like how money is now. You have it, but you never tangibly touch it. It kind of
Sure.
just floats between entities and desks. But yeah, being able to make a bigger impact for a broader number of people, and for it to still have that warm fuzzy feeling, for lack of a better term, like it's still tangible, you can still see all the good stuff. You do all this hard work and you never quite know if it pays off,
Sure.
but you'll be able to see kind of the fruits of your labor again, as you mentioned. It may be 5, 10, 15 years down the line,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, you're like, oh, I was the one that helped do X, Y, and Z, and now all these families get to benefit from this great policy, or this
Yeah.
great thing that was brought to San Mateo.
Yeah. 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 I totally get it. You're building sort of a legacy, right? Something that you can point at and say to your son, "Hi, I did that."
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the huge driving forces behind the candidacy. Like I said, this was always my trajectory. Me and my wife, like, she used to joke that, because I was like when we first met, oh, I'll never do politics. I'm kind of just going to stay. And then it took all of like a year and a half. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess this kind of is where I'm headed. And then the more you get involved, like since I've been in San Mateo, the more you get involved, and like I mentioned earlier, you take a couple civil academy courses, and you find the inner workings of the city. You start meeting city employees, first responders, and these leadership groups, and you see all these amazing people. And you're like, okay, yes, I want to establish the roots here, but I also want to make sure, we're all moving in the same direction and we all are moving towards like a positive future for these families. I deal with a lot of people in my daily job. We serve San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, but a majority of our participants are from San Mateo. And within that subsector, a great majority of them are actually in my district, in District 2. And there's just some resources and things that they don't have access to that you would like to see the city kind of like take an ear to and pay a little closer attention to some of those families that are without.
Well, and on that note, I mean, let me kind of change topics a little bit and build on what you basically mentioned. I know based on your website, affordable housing is kind of like one of your top priorities. Right. What are some of the initiatives that you would propose to increase affordable housing?
So I think the easy one right off the bat, because we're in San Mateo, is Measure T. I don't think we can like have the affordable housing conversation without talking about Measure T. I am in support of it. It's a crucial tool in our community. On the like, I guess for lack of a better term, like the smaller things, it keeps the control here. Mm-hmm. It gives us opportunity to build where we want to build, so that we're not having to build in suburbs or deep in neighborhoods and kind of change the landscape of the city completely. And it also, affordable housing, I mentioned this at a couple forums, affordable housing has become like a buzzword, like a hot topic, kind of like DEI. People kind of throw it out. It's like, oh yes, affordable housing. And yes, it's amazing. But I want to make sure that here in San Mateo, we're discussing affordable housing. Not only are we talking about like the type of housing, like throughout the transit corridor, smaller units, denser, little bit higher. I know that's also right, but just a little bit higher, but also we define like what affordable housing is. In some of the counties, there's affordable housing units, but the affordable housing units start at like $100,000. Mm-hmm. Not saying that those people shouldn't have those affordable housing units, but that's not where it should start. Like there are families that, we need to start at like 30, 40, whatever the rate, 30 to 60, then 60 to 80, and 80 to 100. We need to make sure that we're hitting all the low to moderate income ranges, so that we are truly addressing the affordable housing. Because if we're building affordable housing units, but we're neglecting a large population of our working families, we're not really addressing kind of like the root cause of all of this, and we're kind of missing out. Like we have this excellent opportunity to build these, if Measure T passes, to build these affordable housing units, but we need to make sure these units are accessible to all, and not just starting it at a level that most people in the next decade won't reach, because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the affordable housing push.
Interesting. Okay. I am curious. So would you propose then just more housing in general across the spectrum in terms of income levels? Is that the goal? Just create more supply at all income levels? Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say that, because then you get into just kind of like throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks. So it needs to be a much closer look. So usually there's 100 units, 10% of them have to be this, 5% of them have to be this. But when we're looking at that, we need to look at the income levels of all San Mateans. So if we just take, and not at the county level, like genuinely at the city level, take a look at average income levels for families, or depending on like the unit sizes, of course, but like just the average family income level, and then start there. Because if we're out pricing the very people we're trying to create the affordable units for, then we're missing the mark. Then we're addressing just one third of the issue. Because yes, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Charles. One thing you were breaking up there, so if you could just kind of back up, say, because I know
Okay.
you were saying something that was actually very important. So if you could back up maybe about 25 seconds there, I
Yeah.
think it's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So when we look at affordable housing, we need to look at the city level incomes for families, and that's how we should look at the percent. 10%, 20%, 30% of these available units start at this dollar amount, and we're making it affordable for all San Mateans, and not just starting it at like a flat rate of, okay, this X number sounds good, we'll start at 80,000 or 100,000 or whatever, because then we're outpricing a third of the working families, and we're creating, on the surface, yes, we are creating affordable housing. But when you kind of peel back the curtain, you take a bigger look, you're like, oh, we didn't do what we wanted to do. Did we check the box? Yes, but I don't think when we're talking affordable housing, we're looking to check a box. We're actually looking to create opportunities for families to have access to affordable units.
Interesting. Okay. Um, on your website, something that actually interests me a whole lot, because I'm a parent as well, is
Mhm.
that you mentioned that everyone deserves quality, affordable childcare. I think just from a surface level, I think we all agree upon that, right?
Right.
So what, and you probably know best. I mean, if you have a less than a 1 year old, you
Yeah.
certainly can use that.
Right.
But that's something you put on your website. I would love to hear how you would implement something like that.
So yes, access to childcare is essential for working families. Firsthand knowledge as someone has provided the childcare for 15 plus years and subsidized childcare, and now a person who is using, as you mentioned, using said childcare, to expand access, it would be pushing for increased funding for subsidized childcare programs. So there's money out there to be had. I'll just put it that way, and I won't bore you with like the CCTR and all the acronyms that come with it. But there are state and federal dollars out there that if you have the facility and you have the teachers, you can go after those funds for subsidized childcare programs, ensuring that those families that we were speaking of, low to moderately low income families, aren't left behind. I would, in my current role, we've developed a relationship with, so how a lot of we've been talking about affordable housing, how a lot of affordable housing units, they'll put like a Costco or a bodega, or hot yoga and all these other attractive things. But we've also been working with lots of developers and putting childcare space on properties, so that
Interesting.
when you're bringing families in, again, your 10, 20, whatever percentage of the families you bring in, they qualify for that subsidized childcare. Because if you're asking people to come and work in your community, it would that's a without childcare, it's a non-starter. Like if you have nowhere to take your kid, and that just makes San Mateo more attractive, and that contributes to the economic growth, the workforce, all of the above. So another key priority is fair wages. The teachers that we currently have are paid an amazing livable wage, and they can continue to not only like provide the childcare, but they can live where they work. That's such a big thing on a lot of levels here in San Mateo. Is it's a novel idea to live where you work. That comes up a lot in the conversations I had with a lot of the first responders. The commute that some of them have. It took me, I actually had to come and Google a couple of the places that they said, because I had not heard of them.
Sure.
But it stinks that, you have a first responder and say, heaven forbid you have like a really big emergency, and you need all hands on deck, and you've got 30% of your first responders, be it EMT, firefighters, police officers, and they're driving an hour and a half just to get back. That's not, that's not convenient. Or depending on whatever the emergency is, like they have families too, so they have to make that decision. Do I stay and protect, take care of my family, depending on that. So again, that's just another way to provide opportunities for people to move into San Mateo. It's kind of twofold. You're creating affordable childcare, subsidized childcare by going after those funds that are out there, and affordable housing. It's kind of a two-pronged approach.
Got it. And then also on your website, you mentioned, well, I'll say it this way. So over the last several years, San Mateo County as a whole has seen a drastic increase in retail and property theft. Now, on your website, you mentioned that community policing and public safety is one of your top priorities.
Right.
How would you propose to solve this theft issue in our community?
So I think it would be bold to say solve. I think make a really good dent and prevent more than the latter is probably a better, solve is a strong and a bold statement that I would say. But I mean, addressing the rise in retail, like in property theft, it requires a multifaceted approach. You're looking long and short game. I actually think that the San Mateo Police Department is doing a really great job. They're using a lot of data-driven approaches to identify like theft hotspots, deploy resources, and like they're looking at it strategically. So they've already, started down that path. And then when you talk about community policing, it's our partners down in Redwood City have an excellent model. Community policing, like outside in. And that also, and when you talk about long-term approaches, it's the root causes of theft, such as economic insecurity, providing better access to social services, job training. When I was talking about Redwood City PALS, they figured out that the teens who were involved in a lot of the retail theft, as crazy as it sounds, they were just bored. I know that sounds awful, but because I can think of a lot of other things to do when I'm bored, but it's just they didn't have anything to do. And if you have a couple bad people in a group in your inner circle, you're just kind of going to roll with whatever they're doing. And to help prevent people from turning, that way, they just provide programs for the teens. So like that's another piece when you're talking about long-term is like you provide the programs for the teens, and we talk about economic, stability. We kind of already talked about like the housing, and then providing, childcare so people can work where they live. So it's the big thing that I've been pushing when I'm having conversations is I don't want us to, like we brought up a couple issues like childcare, housing, community policing, public safety, but they're not silos. They are all interconnected, and there's an intersectionality with all of this stuff. I could point to a lot of it beginning with like the affordable housing, but most of this stuff is all interconnected, and trying to like play whack-a-mole and like solve one problem independent of another. I think that's when those are when your blind spots happen, and that creates opportunities to miss the mark. So looking at all these things like holistically and knowing that they play off each other is kind of the lens that I'm using when I'm talking about a lot of these issues in my platform.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Well, Charles, those are the hardball questions. The way I like to end things off is kind of make it a little bit more personal. So
Okay.
I have a question for you. Since
Yes, sir.
you've lived all over the country, if you had some out-of-town guests come and visit, which San Mateo restaurant would you take them to?
What restaurant? So I'm gonna give you kind of a two-part answer. So
Okay.
I would take them. I mean, there's a lot of great restaurants. I would take them to Pacific Catch, mainly because Pacific Catch has like everything.
Yeah.
And if you've ever had a group of people trying to figure out what to eat for dinner, it gets a little more political than politics. It's like, no, you have that one person that's allergic to this, or that one person that doesn't like
Right.
sushi, or that. So it's like Pacific Catch has something for everyone, including kids. We actually had some friends come in a couple months back, and we took them there, and they were really excited because of the kids menu, because they're like, oh, they even have a great kids menu. But I would be remiss if I didn't say we're making a stop at Antoine's cookie, because my wife is a
Oh
dessert
yeah,
connoisseur, and she's going to make sure that we stop somewhere and grab some cookies on the way home.
for sure. Great choices.
Yes,
Great choices,
yes.
Charles. Well,
Thank
hey,
you.
listen, thanks you so much for coming by to talk with me. I wish you the best of luck on the elections, and hopefully in a couple months we'll chat again because you got elected.
I hope so. Either way, we'll chat, but I hope it's because of that. Thank you so much, Bert.
All right, Charles. Take care.
Have a good one.